Hello, and welcome to Sarah's Baked Goods. Today we're going to be making pies for my mom's retirement party. We're going to be making a cherry pie for her, and we're also going to be making a meat pie for the dinner. We're going to be changing out the celery for parsnips, just for extra testing out purposes. So, let's get into it. We're going to start by putting the sugar into our cherries to get the moisture out. My mom likes it sweet, so we'll go with the maximum amount of sugar. I'm using salted butter. I normally only use unsalted, and I do it that way so that I know how much salt to put in. But if you're using salted butter, you don't need to put salt in here. There will be enough salt in the butter itself. Once you have your sugar in here, we're just going to mix this up. Make sure that all of the sugar is touching all of the cherries. These are frozen cherries, so they'll take a bit more time to let the juices come out. So we'll come back to do the cherries in about half an hour to an hour. While we let this rest, we'll do our meat pie. Now onto our meat pie. I have all the spices in here, your cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves, and the bay leaf. Make sure that you know where this is so you can take it out. Garlic and onions. We're gonna sweat these with a little bit of oil. And then we'll add in the potatoes, parsnips, and carrots once these have cooked for a little bit. Once these have cooked for a little bit, we'll add in our milk. Let it simmer and then get started cooking our meat. Now that the onions and garlic has sweated, we're going to add in our other vegetables, so the carrots, parsnips. Then I'll add in the potatoes. Make sure you stir this up slightly so that nothing burns and that you cook them out a tiny bit before you put any liquids in. Just like so. Then we'll get started on our meat, put a little oil down. And then we're going to make a big giant pancake out of the meat. This will make sure it browns as much as possible on one side, then you flip it, brown it on the other side, and then we'll break it up to fully cook it later. Then, once your vegetables have cooked slightly on direct heat, we're going to add in our milk to make sure it simmers and fully cooks through. Now we'll go over to the meat, make sure that it's fully brown and not just gray. Brown is going to be your nice flavor. So once it's fully brown on one side, you can then flip it, let it fully brown on the other side, then break it up until it's fully cooked. Make sure you season at the end, because if you season early, as things cook out, it's going to get more salty, more peppery as it goes. And so if you do it right at the beginning and it tastes really good, by the end it's going to be very salty and very peppery. But make sure you season both the meat and the vegetables, and then if one is too salty or too peppery, you reduce on the other one until you got a nice balance together. Now that we've let it brown on the side, let's flip it over. Flatten it out again. Let it brown again until the end. Once they're both done, take out that bay leaf so that it's not eating wood. And we're going to just mix both of them into the pot. Again, make sure that you season them and both taste good together, and so that you don't mess up your pie. So first we'll put the vegetables in, and then we'll put the meat in. Once you've poured both in, just give it a nice mix. I'm going to be just freezing the pies unbaked because I want to bake it at the location we're going to be staying for the party. That way it's super fresh and it makes the house smell a lot better. But we've got to drive quite a while to get there, so I want to make sure that there's fully frozen so that it's a nice trip and nothing goes bad by the time we get there. So we'll let this cool before we make it into our pie. If you're gonna bake this right away, you don't have to wait till it gets fully cooled. You can put it in quite warm because you're gonna bake right away. If it is warm and you're gonna try and freeze it or anything, what could happen is, number one, if it's warm and you put it in the freezer, you might heat up your freezer and make everything go bad. But number two is, all the liquid in here can seep into the dough a lot more when it's hot rather than cold, and could make your dough a lot soggy, and then when you do bake it, whenever you do, it won't taste as good. So keep that in mind if you're gonna freeze it or if you're gonna bake right away. But for me, I'm gonna bake a little bit from now, so I'm going to let this get to room temperature before I put it into our pie dough. Remember to let this sit in the strainer for a good while so that all the juices are drained out. Pour these back. Get any extra liquid that you can in there. And then we'll start cooking this. Get this to boil and get your slurry ready. Once it starts boiling, you can add in your slurry and keep stirring. Make sure you stir it right away or you're going to get gelatinous starch in some spots and none in others. Will make it lumpy and not so pleasant to eat. Take it off the heat and then add in your butter. And then just slowly mix that in. Once this is fully mixed in, you'll add it back to your cherries. We'll let that cool as well. While that's cooling, we'll roll out both of our pie doughs, get them ready. By that time, the cherries should be cool enough to fill both of them, and we'll put them in the freezer. There you go. Got a nice thick sauce, perfect for your pie. We're gonna start the lattice pie first, which is the cherry pie. We're just gonna roll it out, set up the pie tin, then start on the next pie. Now let's just put this on top. Remember, this is a lattice pie, so leave lots of dough on the outside. Be very careful with this because we'll make this for our lattice. However, because I'm going to get this set up for the meat pie, I'm going to put this in the fridge so it can rest while I do that. With this done and ready, I'm going to put this in the fridge as well to rest and get this meat pie done. Once I have both these done, I'll put the fillings in, cover them, lattice them, get everything ready, and then let them sit in the freezer till they're ready to go. Now on to the meat pie. Now let's just put it on. Remember, this is the covered pie, so you don't want a lot on the outside. So make sure you cut it a lot closer. You're gonna have plenty of dough because you're gonna top it. We'll add this to our top so that it's nice and big, and we'll start filling these. Now to start working on that top, remember, when you freeze this dough, or whenever you make this dough, that you separate it into two pieces, so you have two nice pieces for the bottom and top. And always use the cut pieces for the top. you want to make sure that your base is the most flaky as possible. Start by rolling this out, make it a nice circle, and then lay every piece on the here nicely so that you don't just crumple it up and make it dense. Also make sure that you're not putting too much flour on this side or your pieces won't stick and you'll just make a floppy dough that will rip apart. And remember, this goes on top of the meat so that you don't see all this. This is the side that you're going to put upwards. So make sure that you pick the pretty side first. And make sure it sticks and doesn't go over the edge, or you're going to get that weird look over this pie topping. Once they're stuck in, you can now flour it here to make sure it's easy and it doesn't stick anymore. Once you're ready to go, make sure you put the ugly side on the bottom. Move this around till you're happy. And then cut the excess off. Just follow the bottom line. And that's the easy way to make sure you're not cutting too much off. And there you are. Sadly, this has been worked too much and will be too dense. You can use this if you're doing this at home, but if you're in a bakery, this dough is too dense and your customer won't come back if you serve them this. Now, let's set this up. You want to make a dome shape with your filling because it makes the pie look bigger and nicer. Then press together your doughs and make sure that they're nicely stuck together. You don't want any of the juices coming out, burning, or anything like that. This will reduce any fire hazard and make sure that you don't ruin the flavor by burning your juices on the outside. Once you have that, you can now crimp. This will also help seal it, so keep that in mind. You don't have to go crazy with the pressing, but just make sure that all of it is sealed. Remember, this is your crimp. You can do it however you want, but also remember, there's no point in making it ugly. So if you are gonna make it this way and you're being a bit lazy and just going as you go and then you just leave it like this, it's not gonna be pretty. Over here it looks a bit weird, so fix it up. All this takes is a few seconds to look over the place and fix any areas that you think look a bit weird. And that turns your pie from an ugly pie that no one's going to want to buy to something that you want to present and show your customers. Now obviously this will depend on what you're doing. If you're baking at home, you can spend all day, but if you're at a bakery, yeah, that took me an extra minute or so, do that, but don't take half an hour just to fix one pie. Now let's cut our star in there. Always do 4 big ones and 4 small ones. Make sure to open them up so it can let out the steam. That will help make sure that it doesn't leak as well. Also, this will make it look better. And there we are. I'll put this into its box and put it in the freezer, and we'll start on our cherry pie. Now let's roll out our lattice with that extra bit. Remember, you're just trying to get long pieces, so you don't want to be going too far width-wise, you want to make sure you have the length. But also remember, you only need 2 long ones. And the rest can be a bit shorter. Because only 2 need to make it across the whole pie, or the others will be on the sides, which won't be as far. Okay, so first start off by squaring it off. So you can get some nice straight pieces. Cut it in half. Obviously make sure that you're doing this easily. I have to step off to the side to show you. It's a lot easier if I'm directly in front of it to see how thick I'm cutting it. But then just cut 6 pieces. So try and cut the rest into 3 pieces each. If you do cut one thin or one too thick, you can always fix it. Well, this is a bit too thick, and this is a bit too thick. So just take off just a tiny bit to fix. Same with this one. There we are. We'll throw this out and start latticing our pie. I always like to start with the big long one. So take your time with it. I kind of messed up because when you're looking from the side, it's a bit weird to look at. But also make sure that when you're looking, these squares look similar. If this one's too small or that one's too big, it means your lattice is a bit weird. Anyways, let's fold in the dough. Careful not to touch the inside and spread it all over the place. If you spread it, it's going to burn in the oven. It's not going to change the flavor too much, but it is going to make it look uglier. So if you're making this at home, you don't need to worry as much. However, I always think as if I was working at a bakery. Now that you have this all good, you can now crimp. There we are. It's all set up. I'll put this in the freezer as well, and we'll come back when we're actually going to bake it. Now that I'm where I'm going to bake, we're just going to egg wash. Sorry for the lighting. It's a bit weird here to get nice lighting, but I did the best I could. All you're going to do is egg wash everything. Make sure that it's egg washed nicely and that you're not missing spots or putting just way too much egg on. Now, because you did freeze it, it's going to change the cherry pie just slightly, but the flavor wise won't change, only the looks will really change. So once you're done egg washing, we're gonna just throw this in the oven. Both are at about the same temperature, So we're just gonna bake them together and not waste too much time. Another thing to remember is with the lattice pie, if you start to bring the juices from the cherries or the blueberries or whatever pie you're making onto your lattice, it's gonna burn and look worse and worse. So be very careful when you're egg washing your lattice pies. But now that they're all egg washed up, I can just throw them in, and once I take them out, I'll give you my feedback on how they taste and how they look, and we'll go from there. Here's how they turned out. Meat pie looking perfectly normal. Now the cherry pie, because I did freeze it, kind of leaked and burnt juices on top of the lattice, so it looks a bit ugly, but what can you do? My mom loved it, so it's a super success. And if you've liked this video, please like and subscribe. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. I even have my own website. Thank you, and have a nice day.